Hey boys and girls, I'm so excited that you joined me this week because I can't wait to find out what animal we get to talk about this week. But before we talk about this week's animal, let's review what we've already talked about and learned, shall we? The first one was the snake. That's right. And this was from the story of Adam and Eve with the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, where we learn that we get tempted all the time, but it's up to us to decide if we want to choose to sin or if we choose to obey God. And the second animal we talked about was the dove. And the dove was from the story of Noah and the ark. And this taught us that God always keeps his promises to us. So, before we get started with this week's lesson, let me describe the animal that we're going to be learning about. This animal lives on the land, but you can also find it in the trees or in the water and all kinds of places. It also comes in different colors, like brown and red and even blue. What animal is blue, huh? But the most popular color it's found in is green. And how it also moves differently than the other animals that we've talked about so far, where the snake slithered on the ground and the bird flew in the air. This one jumps. You think you know what it is? That's right. It's the frog. So before we get started with this learning about the frog, let's review our memory verse, shall we? And remember, our memory verse comes from Psalm 25, verse 4. And it says, Lord, show me your ways. Teach me how to follow you. Should we have all the boys say it first? All right, let's go. Lord. That was excellent. All right, let's go, girls, see if we can do it just as well. Lord, show me your ways. Teach me how to follow you. Psalm 25, verse 4. That was excellent, you guys and girls. Thank you so much. Now, do you think you can think of what Bible story the frog comes from? That's right. I heard a couple of you say it. It's one of the plagues from Egypt. And there are actually 10 plagues from Egypt, but we're not going to read all of them today. But if you want to read them, you can take your time this week and read all 10 of them. You can find them in Exodus 7 through 11, talks about them. But we're going to read about one specific one, which, as you can guess, is the plague of frogs. And this is found from Exodus 8, verses 1 through 15. 7 days passed after the Lord struck the Nile. Then the Lord said to Moses, Go to Pharaoh and say to him, This is what the Lord says, Let my people go, so that they may worship me. If you refuse to let them go, I will send a plague of frogs on your whole country. The Nile will teem with frogs. They will come up into your palace and into your bedroom and onto your bed, into the houses of your officials and on your people, and into your ovens and kneading troughs. The frogs will come up on you and your people and all your officials. Then the Lord said to Moses, Tell Aaron to stretch out your hand with the staff over the streams and canals and ponds and make frogs come out of the lands of Egypt. So Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the land. But the magicians did the same thing by their secret arts. They also made frogs come up on the land of Egypt. Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, Pray to the Lord to take frogs away from me and my people, and I will let your people go to offer sacrifices to the Lord. Moses said to Pharaoh, I leave to you the honor of setting the time for me to pray for you and your officials and your people, that you and your houses may be rid of the frogs, except for those that remain in the Nile. Tomorrow, Pharaoh said. Moses replied, It will be as you say. so that you may know there is no one like the Lord our God. The frogs will leave you and your houses, your officials, and your people. They will remain only in the Nile. After Moses and Aaron left Pharaoh, Moses cried out to the Lord about the frogs he had brought on Pharaoh. And the Lord did what Moses asked. The frogs died in the houses, in the courtyards, and in the fields. They were piled into heaps, and the land reeked of them. But when Pharaoh saw that there was relief, he hardened his heart and would not listen to Moses and Aaron, just as the Lord had said. So, can you imagine that, boys and girls? That'd be crazy to think that your whole entire house was filled with frogs. They would be in your bed when you're trying to sleep. They would be on the kitchen, on the counter, when you're trying to eat your food. They'd probably jump in your bowl of cereal, just make a mess everywhere. It would just be awful, wouldn't it? Well, the Israelites were God's chosen people. They had been slaves for hundreds of years, and God was determined to free them from Egypt. He sent Moses to warn Pharaoh there would be consequences for defying God's commands. But Pharaoh refused to listen, did he? 10 plagues were swept across Egypt, and it wasn't until Pharaoh's only son that he died that he was willing to admit defeat. God's people, the Israelites, were spared much of the anguish Pharaoh and his people suffered. God used the plagues to rescue his people so they could move to a land of their own. God is truly all-powerful. He will use his power to save us, and he will use his power to help us do his will on earth. Now, do you boys and girls think you know and can remember the 10 plagues that happened in Egypt? I hear some of you say yes and some of you no. Well, today I'm going to teach you a very quick and easy way so that you can remember the 10 plagues, and it involves your hands, because there's 10 plagues and you have 10 fingers, so it works out great. So the first one is the plague of blood, where God turned the Nile River into blood and made all the water across Egypt be blood. So we're going to use our pointer finger, just a number 1, because it's the first plague, and we're going to pretend to prick it, because if you go to the doctor and they prick your finger, what happens? Blood comes out, right? It starts to bleed just a little bit. So we're going to pretend that we're pricking our finger and blood comes out, just like it did in the water with the first plague. Now, the second plague was the plague that we just got done reading about, the plague of frogs. So I'm going to have you hold up a pointer and the middle finger on one hand, and we're going to bend them over, and we're going to act like they're frogs. Ribbit, ribbit, ribbit. You're just like little frogs eyes jumping around. So that is the plague of frogs. The third plague is the plague of gnats, where gnats were just flying everywhere, and they're just little teeny tiny bugs, so they're really annoying. So we're going to hold up our 3 fingers, and we're going to pretend that we're scratching all over, because they just pester. So the third plague was the plague of gnats. The fourth plague is we're going to hold up 2 and 2. So 4 fingers. So the fourth plague is the plague of flies. So we're going to bring them together, and we're going to be little flies flying all around. So that is the fourth plague, the plague of flies. The fifth plague is the plague of livestock. So we're going to have one hand, and we're going to take these 4 fingers and put them down. And then this one is going to stay straight out. So you have your hand, and you're going to bring those 4 down. And those are so kind of is like an animal. And the plague of livestock was when God killed all the livestock in Egypt. So we have our little animal, and he's walking along, and boop, he dies. So we're just walking him along, and he dies. So that is the 5th plague, the plague of livestock. The 6th plague is the plague of boils. So we're going to hold up 6 fingers. So 5 and 1 is 6. And we're going to put this hand flat. And then we're going to pretend that we're touching this hand. And we're going to go, ow, or ew, ew, ow, ouch, ugh. Because it's boils and they were sores and they hurt and they were gross and it was just no fun for anybody. So that's the sixth plague, the plague of boils. The seventh plague is the plague of hail. So we're gonna take our one hand and have the 5 fingers and then 2, which is 7. But we're gonna use this hand like we did with the livestock. So it's gonna go down like this again. And then our 2 fingers will be over here. And we're gonna pretend to hit it. Because God had hail hit everything in Egypt. The houses, the people, everything was getting hit with hail. So everything gets hit with the hail. So that is the 7th plague. The 8th plague was the plague of locusts. And we're going to do 4 and 4. And then we're going to pretend to fly around like locusts. They're kind of like grasshoppers. But locusts ate all the crops in Egypt. So there was no food for them from the crops. So that is the 8th plague. The 9th plague was the plague of darkness. So we have our one hand with the 5 fingers, and then we have our other hand with the 4. And we're gonna use this hand to cover our eyes, and this hand we're gonna pretend to feel our way, because it's dark and we can't see. Because God sent a plague of darkness. So that's the 9th plague. And the 10th plague was a plague of the firstborn, where God killed Pharaoh's firstborn son and other sons in Egypt. But he didn't kill the sons of Israelites because they had the blood around the door. So we're going to have our 10 fingers and we're going to pretend that we're smearing blood over the door. So that is the plague of the firstborn. So you think you got it, boys and girls? All right, let's review it just one more time quickly, all right? The first one was the plague of blood, so we pricked our finger. Second plague was the plague of frogs, so we bend over, ribbit. Third plague was the plague of gnats. Oh, they itch, they itch. The fourth plague is the plague of flies, so they're flying all over. The fifth plague, the plague of livestock. So we have our hand, bend down, they fall over because they died. Sixth plague, the plague of boils. So we touch our hand. Ew, ouch, ew, ew, ow, for the plague of boils. The seventh plague is the plague of hail. So we have our 5 fingers and 2. We bend them down and pretend to hit it like hail. This 8th plague is the plague of locusts. So 4 and 4. And pretend to swarm and fly like locusts that ate all the crops. The 9th plague, the plague of darkness. So we have this hand and this hand, and we cover our eyes and we pretend to feel our way around because it's all dark. And the 10th plague was the plague of the firstborn, where God killed all the firstborn sons, including Pharaoh's, that night. And they didn't kill the Israelites because they had the blood smeared over the door. So we pretend to smear the blood over the door. All right? So thanks for joining me, boys and girls, this week. And I hope that helps you remember the 10 Commandments. And I just want to read a little summary for you. And it goes like this. When we read how God used his power to help Moses and the Israelites, we can find the faith to stand for God as well. We can trust that God will make us a witness for Christ when we say no to peer pressure and choose to obey God. We know that God will give us the strength and courage to serve him and to help others. God is more powerful than any storm. He's greater than any king or government on earth. When the Israelites cried out to God, he heard their cries and saved them. And we can cry out to God in our time of need as well. We can have faith knowing that God is powerful, and in our time of need, he will save us. So thanks for joining me again. And also, if you go on the website where our at-home projects are always located, there is a video that you girls can watch that is about Moses and the Israelites and the 10 plagues of Egypt and their escape out of Egypt. And it's by a fun group that I like to watch, and it's called Superbook Academy. And they have these 2 kids and a robot that goes and they kind of like watch it all happen. It's really fun. So I hope you boys and girls check it out. See you next week.